Hello, this is Aaron, and welcome back to the podcast. Again, I'm not really recording this on the normal schedule this week. I'm recording this several days early because I've got a stretch of 4 different presentations to give in 5 days in 2 different cities. So I'm going to be on the road, but I want to be able to get up the podcast for you on Monday as scheduled. So here I am on Wednesday actually recording this. So I'll say Happy New Year to everyone. I hope you had a Happy New Year, even though it is actually before New Year's today. But because it is the new year, I wanted to have another topic that could be practical for us in thinking about what we do over the course of the next year, 2022. I was thinking about this in terms of last week's podcast about passing on our patrimony and teaching our kids patriotic songs. This week, a different topic. And this is actually a question that someone had sent me and suggested I do a podcast on. Back last year, I interviewed John Moody and Rory Groves about essentially homesteading, rural homesteading. Rory's take wasn't entirely about rural homesteading, but you can tell that he sort of has that orientation. And so the question I got is, Aaron, you should do a podcast on how we create essentially homesteads in the city or a productive household in the city. And the reality is most of us do not live on farms, okay? We live in an urban or a suburban environment. So how do we think about a productive household in that regard? So I want to share a few thoughts today, and then you can maybe put these into practice this year if you think that they're good. And there are some actual homesteading type things that you can do in the city even. For example, you could plant a garden. You could have backyard chickens. You can compost. There's a lot you can do to have essentially a rural type productivity in a city. Now, am I an expert on urban gardening in your backyard? I am not. I've never had backyard chickens, so I'm not going to talk about that. But you can easily find a lot about that online if you're interested. What I want to talk is about some things that I did that made my household more productive. And this was, in essence, simple insourcing. One of the things that we've done over the course of the last couple of decades, 3 decades, is that more and more of our lives are outsourced. Now, this is clearly much more prevalent at higher income levels. That doesn't mean millionaire levels. I mean, just someone with, say, a professional income college degree level. It's more common there than it is at lower levels. But I think even lower income people now outsource a lot of things that we would have previously done. And so, in essence, just by doing for ourselves things that we're paying other people to do today, we are making our household more productive in a sense. That is to say, we are producing more things in our home and transacting less with the marketplace. And so, do we necessarily have to do that? I'm not saying you do, but if there's something you do, you might want to take it on. Now, some of this for me was a case of sort of necessity is the mother of invention. I cut back on some of the things I was outsourcing at a time when my income went down a lot. And so I'm like, well, I better cut back. But there are other things that I've made conscious choices. I just want to share a few things that you can do to start doing things at home and not pay people to do them. The first one is just to cook your own meals. Stop eating out. Stop doing DoorDash. Stop ordering the pizza. All that stuff. You know, when I was a kid in the 80s, almost nobody went out to restaurants very often. You know, if you were from a more middle class, doing better with family, maybe you were a union Ford worker or something like that. Maybe you went out to a restaurant once a week. Most people ate at home, right? People cooked their own meals. People did not go out to restaurants and order food like they do today. I mean, we go out to eat way, way, way more than people used to do back then. So just by cooking our own meals, that is one way for us to make our household more productive. And that's something I've been doing for a long time. For one thing, I wanted to be able to have much more control over what I ate. I really wanted to eat healthy, eat clean, as they say. I was trying to refactor my diet. And one way to do that is to make sure I do the food shopping and I do the cooking. And so I started doing that many years ago. Now that we are married, my wife does most of the cooking. I cook a little bit too. I can cook. But we make most of our meals at home. That's not to say we never go out to eat. We do sometimes, but most of our meals are cooked at home. And yes, if you are a single mother who works, it is going to be more challenging to do that. I acknowledge not everybody's in a situation where it's just easy to cook, but you know what? I was raised by a single mom. She had a job and she cooked dinner every night. We were not going out to eat every night. So I know if my mom could do it, I think it's very doable. I think it's very doable. We can start cooking at home. Secondly, again, just another thing we could do, we could clean our own house. I mean, I'd say a huge share of sort of upper middle class people have a cleaning service to clean their house. I used to do that. I mean, I had people clean my house for years, going back into the 1990s. And again, this is one of the things I cut out at the time that my income went down, but it's something I've never come back. I could probably, say, well, if I really wanted to splurge and have somebody come in periodically and clean our house, we could do that. I don't want to do that. And I'll tell you more about why I don't want to do it. But basically, we clean our own house. And actually, I do a lot of it. Like every Saturday morning, I just kind of go through and do kind of thorough house cleaning. That's one. Just another one was ironing my own shirts. When I went to Chicago, I was in the business world. I used to just take all my shirts to the dry cleaner. It was like $1 for a shirt. And, they launder it, they press it. It's great. You have to do anything. And actually, you know what? Now, dry cleaning's got a lot more expensive. And particularly here in Indianapolis, it's actually expensive even to just have your shirts laundered. And there aren't dry cleaners on every corner like there are in New York or Chicago. So it's kind of a pain to take it in. And this is something that I started doing probably 15 plus years ago when I actually got some nicer shirts. And I'm like, wow, I want these shirts to last. So I sort of hand washed them, laid them to dry, and ironed them myself. It actually did make the shirts last a very long time. Those actually, although they were the most expensive shirts I ever bought, they probably turned out to be the cheapest shirts I ever bought on a price per wear basis. Again, going back to my idea of barbell purchasing, where the barbell here is, two extremes, not the middle. Buying the absolute best actually can be cheaper on a price per use basis because it lasts long if you know what you're actually doing. Otherwise, maybe you're better off getting the cheapest because the stuff in the middle is quite often not that great on a price performance basis. But nevertheless, I still iron my own shirts, launder them at home, iron my own shirts. I don't need to take those into the dry cleaner. Again, a lot of people today pay a landscaping service to mow your grass. You could mow your own grass. You could take care of your own yard. Now, again, it's a little easy for me because I have a very small yard. And in fact, I don't even have a power mower. I've got one of those little whirly blade things, the manual ones that are unpowered. You just push them and they spin around and cuts them. I do have a gas-powered weed whacker, so I use that. But I take care of the yard. And so I don't pay people to do the yard. Some of you might even cut your own hair. When I started losing my hair and decided to, I couldn't part the hair on the side anymore. It was getting a little too crazy. This was in my 20s. I started losing my hair very young. I went with a clipper. So I'm going to the barber shop and getting the clipper cut. And then I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to invest in a set of clippers. So I got a pair of clippers and I cut my own hair at home for quite a while. And then I got kind of tired of that and I went back to it. But then, I decided to go slick and now I just shave it. So I don't actually ever have to incur any barbershop expenses. It's very easy for me to take care of my own head every couple days with a razor and some shaving cream. Now, again, if not all guys probably would be advised to cut their own hair. But if, like me, you're one of the guys who's maybe, losing it a little bit, shall we say, maybe it's something you could do for yourself. Another thing, just around the house, John Moody mentioned this one, is that you could make your own household cleaners. And I mentioned this to my wife, and she said, yeah, a lot of her friends, especially ones with big families, they're looking to save money, they make almost all their own household cleaners. And I've never done this, and it's actually something, I want to look into. Maybe I could, make my own pine saw or something, make my own Windex. I don't have to buy that stuff, or especially the all-purpose cleaner that you can use on the kitchen countertops and stuff like that. So I'm going to look into that and say, hey, is this something I could do? And then I think for the guys, the other thing you could do is you could just do your own home repairs. Again, my dad could literally build an entire house by himself. I think every single task you need to do to be able to build a house, he knows how to do. In fact, he was a carpenter briefly in the 70s, and then later he had a period where he was a construction superintendent working for home builders. And so he knows all about that. But for some reason, I never learned how to do anything. I mean, I could change a light bulb. That was about it. And now I've started trying to do my own small repairs around the house. I really am very hesitant to try to do anything with plumbing, or electrical that would be, might cause a problem. Let's say if it's done wrong. If I tried to swap out a faucet or something like that, I probably wouldn't be able to sleep at night. But there are little things, that I do. I put a new hinge on this closet door that wasn't working well. I'll clean out drains and things like that. I've definitely augured out some drains, cleaned out P-traps, little things like that. I mean, again, small, tiny things. I'm not claiming to be anything remotely like a handyman, but just now I think, can I do this myself? And if I do it because I actually want to be building those skills in my life. And in fact, I actually rent. I mean, I would be perfectly entitled to just submit a maintenance request to the landlord and make them take care of everything. But in this case, I actually kind of like to do it myself sometimes. I feel like I'm learning things and I'm gaining good skills. I mean, there are things I don't do myself where I feel like if I'm not qualified, I'm really not going to be able to do it, then I'm not going to do it. But, I'm willing to take some chances on some things now. That's kind of great. So people always say, well, Aaron, what you don't understand, okay, is the reason that you outsource is you haven't read your Adam Smith. We get productive by specializing and then engaging in trade. So by paying people to, do my laundry for me, paying people to clean my house, paying people to mow my grass, paying people to pay me, that's much more efficient. They specialize in that. It's lower cost. It's comparative advantage. And then I specialize in all these high-value, productive activities. It frees up so much of this time for me to be so much more productive, etc. And, if that's really true for you, then go for it. But what I've kind of discovered is, the truth is, if I weren't spending Saturday morning cleaning my house, am I going to be doing something that's making me more money? Am I going to be richer somehow because I put that to good use, right? Probably not. Well, let's be honest, right? I'm probably just going to be spending a little more time reading the newspaper or something, which, hey, if you want more leisure, you can. Again, I'm not treating any of this stuff as if it's some moral, imperative for you to start doing this stuff at home. You make whatever choices you want. I'm saying this stuff because I was asked about it and because these are some of the things that I was doing to try to insource more productivity into my household and stop paying people to do things. And by the way, it can actually reduce your expenses over time. Now, there is one kind of, I would say, moral dimension to this. And the moral dimension is that many of these people that we're outsourcing to are, in essence, exploited labor. A lot of the reasons that people have the cleaning services, a lot of the reasons that people have the landscaping today, is because there's an exploited immigrant who's not being paid a living wage doing that job. The cleaning service that I had in Chicago, I think back about this, never occurred to me at the time. I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on? It was this woman, and she was Polish, and she had all these Polish ladies, maybe illegal. I don't know if they were illegal, but they were clearly from Poland. They barely spoke English. A lot of them were older, and they would clean houses, and they were clearly being paid dirt. Like, the woman who was sort of the pimp, if you will, she always made sure she always got there to make sure she got the money. None of these people even knew how much money she was getting paid. I know this because one time one of the workers accidentally did find out how much we were paying, and she was very upset because she's like, wait a minute, I'm getting totally exploited here, which is true. So I do think we have to think about the exploited labor that we're using for our own conveniences. And again, in this world, it's never going to be possible to fully detach ourselves from certain exploitative elements of the modern globalized economy. But what I can say is we should be thinking about it. We should be thinking about it. And yeah, you know what? I would probably feel differently. If there was a next door neighbor with a teenage kid who wanted to make some money mowing grass, maybe that's somebody I would think about hiring to mow my yard, because that's someone that I really want to support. It's going in their pocket. I would look at it, but I'm just going to pay some company that may be using illegal immigrant labor that they're exploiting. And I'm not going to ask you any questions because I don't want to know about that because I don't want to mow my grass. I don't know about that. And again, if you're rich, if you're higher income, then you can very easily afford to pay people a living wage, and pay all the taxes and all that stuff to do things. It's when you start getting down to these middle class areas that people start to get, again, more exploitative. I mentioned, in the city, all these people in the Upper West Side of New York that I knew, almost all of them were hiring kind of nannies, immigrant nannies, cash under the table. They weren't paying the Social Security tax. They weren't paying, any of the things, no benefits, no nothing, because they couldn't afford it. They couldn't afford it. They were just sort of squeezing by, even though they had sort of high income. So I do think we ought to be aware of the labor exploitation angle. And I think we ought to be wary of rationalizing this idea that if we pay people to do things, that we'll be so much more productive or we'll spend so much more time with our kids. In my experience, that just hasn't been the case. But again, it's not a moral imperative. You can do what you want. So I think that this idea of insourcing, figuring out the things that you're paying other people to do and saying, how can I not pay people to do that and start doing it myself, is one way to think about making your household more productive, if that's something you want to do, and kind of detaching yourself a little bit from this sort of transactional economy that we have. The other thing you can do to essentially be productive in your kind of urban household is really make a practice of hospitality. Invite people into your home for dinner. And one of the things that this really does is gives you the opportunity to showcase the way that you live with your life, the way that you are living kind of in a countercultural way to society. I've mentioned before, I think in a podcast, that my wife and I used to like to do this in New York. We would invite people over to our house for dinner, from church. I think we had a small place. We have a table that essentially seats two, right? You could maybe get three people on it. It was kind of ridiculous. But, we're, this married couple, we're cooking at home, we're building a family life that's very different from a lot of the other people, many of whom are single. And so just by inviting people to come into our home and to invite them into our life, they see a different way of living. And a lot of the single people we invited over, they really appreciated it because they really felt like they did not get invited over to people's homes, that they were sort of excluded from some of that social life, and they were kind of craving some of that, and they really felt good about it. And so maybe that's something you do. There are it could be other married people. Maybe you can invite single people in. This one single woman that we invited over from our church to come in, she struck up a friendship with my wife, and ultimately I think she decided, wait a minute, I need to rethink what I'm doing, and my priority I put on marriage versus other things that I'm doing, because she had a boyfriend that she was serious with, and they broke it off for various reasons. She actually called him back, and they ended up getting married, which is amazing. And I think about that during COVID because, this woman, with, COVID, she would have been totally up the creek in New York. And now being married, I haven't actually talked to them. I don't know what's going on, but I think they're going to be in a much better place there. So I think hospitality is really an opportunity for you to show love to other people, using your home, as a way to do that. And then it's a way to show that you live a different world. It's almost an evangelistic opportunity. And of course, it may be an opportunity to share the gospel with some people as well, if they're non-Christians. So I think this idea of hospitality, this is one that here in Indianapolis, we have actually not done as good a job as we did in New York, in part because of COVID and this and that. But it's one of these, hey, I'd like to get better at this and start inviting people over more frequently throughout number 2022. So I think those are some avenues. And I want to give one more kind of caveat on this idea of, doing all this stuff yourself and, trying to insource. I think that's great. I've been doing that, but I do think you need to think about some of the things that this blogger I'd highlighted several times, the Practical Conservative, who's a stay-at-home mom, as well as a guest commenter, Tom Addison, brought up around the fact that, mothers of young kids, mothers of preschoolers especially, are under enormous stress. And there's this idea among a lot of conservative Christians that the mom is just supposed to do everything. And if you hired somebody to do something with your kids, right, if you're hiring these services, you're somehow betraying the authentic Christian stay-at-home mom life, right? And obviously, when you have a stay-at-home mom, it's a lot easier for her to cook or do all these other things. But I would say we shouldn't be afraid to give our wives a break. And if they, if we need to start paying people to do things during these times when they are really super under a lot of strain, with raising these young kids aren't in school yet, especially, let's think about that, because we don't want to pile up heavy burdens so high onto people that it becomes essentially antinatalist, right? People don't want to have kids because there's too much work. I think, we'd want to encourage people to have more kids. And if, having more kids, plus you've got to, cook, clean, this, that, entertain, etc. You don't want to put too much pressure on your wife or whoever and end up crushing her because of all this work. I mean, a lot of the stuff that I say, I don't do most of the cleaning today. I do most of this stuff myself. I actually do once a week house cleaning. I take care of the yard. I iron my own shirts. I do a lot of it myself, and then and then it's done. I do it, and the only person that can complain about it is me, and I do it exactly the way I want to do it as well. So I'm not just piling all this stuff on my wife. So I do think we need to be cognizant maybe of the burden that we put on our wives, especially if they have, again, if you have young children at home. That's very difficult. We want having kids to be great, not make it some audacious task because we think we have to have this mommy blogger life all the time. So those are a few ideas, a few things that you could think about. What are you doing that you're paying someone to do today that you could start doing yourself? That's the number one way to make your own household more productive. Now, it may well be that that's not a wise decision. Could be. I'm not saying this is a moral thing. I'm just saying if you want to have a more productive household, this is one way to do it. And I think we should look at hospitality and just inviting people into your home, sharing your life, loving them. And a lot of people are, especially in this COVID thing, man, they are hurting for human contact. And especially a lot of single people. It could be great to invite them over and to let them be part of it. So think about that. Those are a few tips, and I will talk to you next week.